Tonight, inflation falls to a 3.5-year low, but it could still be a while before interest rates are cut. I'm Lexy Hamilton-Smith and this is ABC News Queensland. Nuclear power divides Queensland's new government from its federal coalition colleagues. Kamala Harris delivers her closing argument in Washington, urging voters not to give Donald Trump a second chance. And how hollow logs are helping the endangered Mary River cod and highlighting their protective instincts. Good evening. Inflation has fallen to a 3.5-year low, but economists say it's still not coming down fast enough for the Reserve Bank to cut interest rates before Christmas.
Inflation rocketed after the first year of COVID and has been smashing the economy since.
It's just a balancing act. Honestly, it's really, really a hard balancing act.
Costs have been increasing, but businesses in many cases can't pass them on.
If you add up the margins, it's what you're going to do. You need to charge $35 for a Palmer, but we don't because no one's going to pay that.
In the 3 months to September, annual inflation fell to 2.8% and was 0.2% for the quarter, driven by price rises in food and overseas travel, particularly to Europe, and breaks at home during school holidays. Other price rises were largely offset by falls in electricity as households received energy rebates and fuel from lower oil prices. The Reserve Bank's preferred measure of inflation, which excludes volatile items, fell to 3.5% annually, down from 4% the previous quarter.
These new numbers show that inflation is at its lowest in almost 4 years. Our energy rebates are helping and we're pleased with that, but underlying inflation's come off substantially as well.
Temporary subsidies will not hoodwink the Reserve Bank of Australia, and they certainly won't hoodwink the Australian public.
People are struggling to pay more and deal with interest rates that have been lifted to try to tame inflation.
Past 18 months, interest rates on my mortgage have gone up. I've had to refinance my house. Cost of everyday items has gone through the roof.
Inflation is falling, but not fast enough to convince the Reserve Bank to cut interest rates.
We think that the RBA will need to see that underlying inflation measure come down a bit lower before they'll be convinced that inflation will not only return to their 2 to 3% target band, but actually stay there as well.
Of the big four banks, only the Commonwealth Bank thought that there was a chance that interest rates would be cut this year. After today's data, it's moved that tip back to at least February. Daniel Ziffer, ABC News.
The nation's Anti-Corruption Commission is tonight under scrutiny, with a new report finding the man at its helm didn't properly deal with a declared conflict of interest following the Robo-Debt Royal Commission. The corruption watchdog will now reconsider its decision not to investigate 6 people referred to it after the findings were handed down.
He's at the helm of the nation's corruption watchdog, but now the questions have turned on him.
I think Paul Brereton's position as Commissioner is in question, as the finding is that he committed officer misconduct as the Commissioner.
At issue, a perceived conflict of interest. Commissioner Paul Brereton was a close associate of one of the people referred to him by the Robo-Debt Royal Commission, and he didn't fully remove himself from the decision not to initiate an investigation, according to the inspector charged with keeping the NAC in check.
Commissioner Brereton should ask himself whether him remaining in that position is good for the National Anti-Corruption Commission.
The decision drew more than 1,200 complaints, with some considering the NAC had breached the public trust. While the Commissioner had declared his relationship and delegated the decision, the inspector still found his involvement in the decision-making was comprehensive. At the meeting where the decision was made, the inspector said the NAC Commissioner contributed to the discussion, settled the minutes and was involved in formulating the reasons for the decision.
The National Anti-Corruption Commission really has to heed the lessons of this episode.
The NAC has labelled this a mistake, a misapprehension by the Commissioner, and for this much anticipated body established to clean up politics, It's a bumpy start in its first high-profile case. Still, there's confidence from the major parties.
I think the public has total trust in the Commissioner and in the Commission.
The system has actually worked in that the Inspector General has said, hey, you need to go back and redo this decision.
A decision many will be waiting on. Evelyn Manfield, ABC News, Canberra.
Former Housing Minister Megan Scanlon is projected to retain the Goldsote electorate of Gavin despite a 7% swing against her. As votes continue to be counted, 5 seats remain too close to call. Canter's Australian Party and One Nation defector Stephen Andrew is projected to lose the electorate of Morani to the LNP's Glenn Kelly. Ms Scanlon's challenger, former television reporter Bianca Stone, contacted her to concede defeat.
There's 11 seats here on the Gold Coast, 10 of them are held by the LNP. They put in a mighty effort to try and, get rid of me. We've worked really hard though, and this is the community that I love.
David Crisafulli's victory has set up an awkward clash over nuclear power. A great divide remains in place between Queensland's view and the Federal Coalition's national scheme. As Matt Eaton explains, legally it could get very messy.
Queensland law currently bans the development of nuclear power, but under the Constitution, the federal government can override that law. So there could be a fight, or Queensland's LNP could toe the line if a Dutton government is elected.
And if Peter Dutton and I get that mandate, we are going to get on with the job, and I would think that because of our relationship with David Crisafulli, we're going to get better results.
In other words, they believe a win means they'll have a nuclear power mandate. Mr Crisafulli says he has chatted to Peter Dutton since Saturday's win.
And did the topic of nuclear come up with Peter Dutton?
No, it didn't. But if it did, he knows my view.
So both sides could be in for a fight, and one that could legally get very messy.
The Commonwealth trumps if its law is valid, but it only has power over certain things, such as economics, corporations, not over political things like whether a state government wants to consult with its citizens.
Herein lies the rub. Queensland's law banning nuclear power requires the relevant minister to call a statewide vote on the issue if it looks likely the Commonwealth is set to intervene.
Unless the state parliament undid that law, there would have to be a plebiscite, and that would be very unpopular.
Under the Dutton plan, 2 nuclear plants are proposed for Callide and Tarong. But if Mr Crisafulli continues to draw a line in the sand at ground zero, it would lead to 2 Conservative governments doing battle. Messy? Certainly. Definitely not a great look.
Devastated community members are rallying around the family of an 11-year-old boy who was killed yesterday when a car careered into students at a school in Melbourne's east. Jack Davey is being remembered as a sweet boy and a gifted athlete who had a very bright future. 4 other children were injured in the horrific crash.
Surrounded by a rising tide of tributes, a grieving family is overcome, struggling to grasp the loss of their son and brother, Jack Davey. This is how they want him remembered, full of joy, ready for another day of school with his mates. But yesterday, that was all cut short.
Our thoughts and heartfelt sympathy are with Jack's family and friends, and our thoughts are also with the 4 students who remain in hospital.
Such a sweet boy, really kind, never heard a bad thing about him.
Just an hour before the bell was to ring, a car performing a U-turn outside Auburn South Primary in Melbourne's eastern suburbs ploughed through the school's fence, fatally striking Jack and seriously injuring 4 of his classmates. This morning, family members, friends and the school community gathered at the scene, leaving tributes and holding their loved ones closer, all trying to make sense of the tragedy.
It's the worst nightmare for parents and families and siblings in a school community that you could possibly imagine.
Jack Davey is being remembered as a natural athlete whose talent shone brightly. In July, he was a member of the Australian Under-12s futsal team, which clinched victory in Fiji. The sport's peak body today paid tribute to a sweet boy, always in their hearts. The 11-year-old was also a gifted Aussie rules footballer, known for being calm under pressure and a tough all-rounder with a bright future. His local club, the Glen Iris Gladiators, devastated by his loss. But for Jack Davey's schoolmates, there are some questions their parents just can't answer.
They're asking me where is boy gone, when he will be back, where is that 4 kids, when they will be back. what I can say, you know.
The driver, a 40-year-old woman from Hawthorne East, was arrested and interviewed but has since been released. The surviving children remain in hospital in a stable condition as the local community rallies around.
This school community is so wonderful and strong, and together we will get through this.
I've got little kids. I can only imagine what it was like to drop Jack off to school and not pick him up.
A thought that many will struggle with. Danny Tran, ABC News, Melbourne.
President Joe Biden has appeared to call Donald Trump supporters garbage after a weekend rally. It came as Donald Trump courted the Hispanic vote in Pennsylvania, trying to brush off the controversy sparked by a comedian's racist joke. And in Washington, Kamala Harris has urged her supporters to reject the former president's efforts to sow division and fear.
In the heart of the Capitol, a speech heavy with symbolism.
We know who Donald Trump is. He is the person who stood at this very spot nearly 4 years ago and sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol to overturn the will of the people in a free and fair election.
Vice President Kamala Harris told the crowd her Republican opponent, Donald Trump, should not be given a second chance.
This is someone who is unstable, obsessed with revenge, consumed with grievance, and out for unchecked power.
What's your assessment of the race?
She's going to kick his butt, yeah.
There's a chance at history to be made, and to be able to be at this speech seems pretty special.
Donald Trump was in the Latino majority city of Allentown in battleground state Pennsylvania, still dealing with the fallout from derogatory comments made at his New York rally.
A floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah, I think it's called Puerto Rico.
Joe Biden has now weighed in.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
The president later claimed it was the hateful rhetoric that was garbage. But the Trump campaign has seized on the comments.
And I hope their campaign is about to apologize for what Joe Biden just said. We are not garbage. We are patriots who love America.
Up with the people, down with them.
In Allentown, opinions were divided.
Even my family that lives on the island right now, they all support Trump.
These recent comments is just a long history of hate. This rally is a rally of hate. That's how we see it.
Urged by some allies to apologise, Donald Trump instead leaned in.
There's never been an event so beautiful. It was like a love fest, an absolute love fest, and it was my honor to be involved.
In its early days, the Harris-Walz campaign was running on a message of joy and the other side being weird. In its final days, it's increasingly adopting the central message that Joe Biden was campaigning on, that Donald Trump represents a threat to the very fabric of this nation.
In a week's time, the country will deliver its verdict. Barbara Miller, ABC News, Washington.
At least 90 people are dead or missing, including many children, after an Israeli airstrike in northern Gaza. The US has called the attack in the town of Beit Lahir horrifying. It also expressed deep concern at Israel's move to ban the UN aid agency and a warning this story contains distressing images.
Bodies line the streets of Beit Lahir as desperate Gazans dig through the rubble with their bare hands, searching for survivors. An Israeli airstrike on a residential building, killing and wounding dozens, including children.
This was a horrifying incident with a horrifying result.
The ongoing strikes underpinning grave concerns about Israel's move to ban the UN relief agency UNRWA in the occupied Palestinian territories.
This will cause great starvation for people. In this way, they're sentencing people to death.
With the backbone of the aid operation there, if you take the backbone out of a body, the body falls apart.
UNRWA's compound in East Jerusalem is already half empty. And Israel's been claiming for months Hamas has infiltrated the agency's staff inside Gaza after it was found 9 workers out of 30,000 across the region may have been involved in Hamas's October 7 attacks.
In no one's wildest fantasies can that be characterised as the entire organisation being infected, infiltrated.
Come to the Knesset, and I'm going to personally show the evidence.
One of the sponsors of the proposal claiming a replacement aid agency will be found.
I think it's going to get even better of everything that UNRWA did.
Nearly 2 million people are displaced within Gaza, and most rely on UNRWA for their survival. It's feared its removal in 3 months' time will have dire consequences for those who remain. There are growing calls for Israel to reconsider, but little willingness from the government, it seems, to listen.
Right now, there is no alternative to UNRWA when it comes to delivering food and other life-saving aid in Gaza.
In southern Lebanon, more than 60 people have been killed in the latest strikes across the Bekaa Valley. While in Sidon, at least 3 apartment buildings have been struck as Israel ramps up its attacks on claimed Hezbollah targets.
This area doesn't have officials or people belonging to different political parties or anything.
Civilians once again bearing the brunt of Israel's relentless campaign. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Jerusalem.
Back home, an abortion is a legal right across the country, but doctors fear an unspoken ban is robbing rural and regional women of the right to choose. An ABC investigation has revealed patients are being denied equitable access due to a range of reasons, including ideological positions, unclear guidelines and a lack of government funding.
Reflective but still reeling. Melissa's carefully planned surgical abortion was upended by a phone call just hours before she was due to be admitted to hospital.
He just basically said, "I'm really sorry, we can't do the procedure today." I was broke down. I was like, "What do you mean you can't? What is that? Where does that leave me?"
On the phone was her obstetrician.
I could tell he was baffled by the whole situation and he didn't understand why it hadn't happened.
Melissa's surgical termination was meant to be performed here at Queensland District Hospital in southern New South Wales. Her baby had severe life-limiting malformations. This hospital had performed the same procedure under similar circumstances before. But the ABC can reveal that since Melissa's experience, the hospital suddenly stopped providing surgical terminations for fetal anomalies and medical reasons. Melissa's GP says there's been no explanation of the late cancellation, despite repeated requests to the local health district. She fears an ideological opposition to abortion could ultimately be behind it.
It feels like you're shadowboxing, that there's a pushback and you're not really sure why, and that's very frustrating.
The local health district says it supports women to access abortion services, including medical termination of pregnancy. Doctors are calling it an unspoken ban. In Orange, the local member's also seeking answers after the hospital there stopped providing abortions for non-medical reasons.
This is something that's permitted under law. It's a public health institution.
The local health district that oversees Orange has confirmed it is sending women seeking abortions for non-medical reasons to private providers or family planning.
The power lies with the Minister and with the Health Department. And it's really important that they ensure that this essential healthcare is delivered.
Melissa eventually had a medical abortion at her local hospital. Ultimately, though, she was denied the right to choose. Lucy Barber, ABC News, Queanbeyan.
It's job cuts on a scale that unions say they have not seen since the pandemic. Hundreds of university jobs have been axed or left in limbo in the lead up to Christmas across the state.
A wave of redundancies are rolling through universities.
We are in what we call a COVID-2 era.
Hundreds of jobs are on the line or have been lost across Queensland. Nearly 50 roles have been axed at Griffith Uni. It's about the same for James Cook University, on top of 17 announced earlier this month. The National Tertiary Education Union says its QUT members report the uni has asked for 70 voluntary redundancies. Uni SQ is yet to detail exactly how many, but it has a $32 million budget hole.
Our unofficial figure at the moment, it's sitting between 80 to 85 staff.
Uni SQ said decisions have not been made on specific staff numbers during the consultation phase, but 27 staff chose to bring their retirement forward as part of a financial incentive scheme. Staff say they're living in limbo.
They don't know if they will have a job after Christmas, and they don't know if they'll have a job leading up to Christmas.
The Griffith Vice-Chancellor says rising costs and problems processing international student visas are to blame.
International students are a really critical part of being able to pay the costs of university. Griffith is only seeing 10 to 15 visas processed a week at the moment.
The Federal Education Minister says the current visa policy, which prioritises international students applying at larger universities, has created an unfair system and regional unis are suffering. A new bill set to cap international student numbers from next year is being hailed as the solution, but some larger universities say this would destroy their bottom line. Griffith University says until visa issues are fixed, further redundancies can't be ruled out.
It's impossible to make promises until we see whether the legislation goes through.
QUT was contacted for comment. Laura Lavelle, ABC News, Brisbane.
Finance Now, here is Alan Kohler.
It took a while for currency traders to figure out what the inflation figures meant. At first, the Aussie went up because the newsflash said hopes of an early rate cut were dashed. But then it tipped over as everyone thought, oh, hang on, maybe it's better than we thought. And it's now trading at 65.4 US cents, down from last night's 65.7. But I think the truth is today's figures change nothing. Sure, headline inflation is 2.8%, well within the target band of 2 to 3%. But we should ignore that because the Reserve Bank does. It looks at the trimmed mean, which cuts off the biggest 15% of price rises and the smallest 15%, and only includes the middle 70%. And that's even more relevant this quarter because of electricity rebates, which have temporarily cut the power prices to 30% below what they would have been. But core inflation is doing better than the Reserve Bank wants it to, which is to come down to 2.6% by the end of 2026. If it keeps doing better, then rate cuts are on. And if you've got young kids and you're thinking that inflation hasn't come down at all, actually, that might have something to do with this. Childcare inflation has soared to well above 10%. The main event on the share market today was also about the cost of living. Woolworths put out a trading update that said customers are under pressure and the earnings outlook is challenged. The share price dropped 6% and other retailers and banks also had a bad day. Globally, it was the US and Japan up, Hong Kong and Shanghai down, and not much happened on commodity markets apart from silver going up more than 2%. And that's finance.
Coming up on 7:30, the community left without reliable power for almost 2 weeks.
If we had a pretty emotive picture of a flood or a fire, people would care more. Meanwhile, we're hemorrhaging internally.
That's put our livelihoods at risk.
Maintenance was not neglected at a cost-cutting measure.
There are many questions that we want to get to the bottom of to understand more clearly the facts that led to the power outage.
Queenslander Nathan McSweeney says he's ready to open the batting for Australia should he be called upon for this summer's Test series against India. Selectors will have a close eye on the Australia A match in Mackay starting tomorrow, as several contenders audition to be David Warner's replacement. McSweeney, who will captain the team, is in excellent but wants to cement his claim for a Test debut. The 25-year-old's been batting down the order for South Australia.
Batting three for South Australia and pretty much my whole career. It's not too dissimilar to opening. I feel like you could be in there the first over of the game. All my preps with the new ball, and so I feel like my game's ready, and hopefully I can get an opportunity. If not, I'll keep trying to get better, and what will be will be.
Cam Smith will return to his junior roots this week in a bid to start his summer of golf on home soil in good form. The former world number 2 will be the star draw card at the Queensland PGA, an event he hasn't played since 2015. The live golfer is home in Brisbane, enjoying a 6-week break before he headlines the Oz PGA next month. It's an event he's won 3 times, but last year he choked back tears after missing the cut, shooting 9 over.
It was kind of a real eye-opener to know what has to be done to prep for these events, and especially for the Aussie ones, they've always been so good to me, and I've always, I'd like to think I've got a pretty good record, and to do something like that was pretty painful. So yeah, don't want to let that happen again.
It's a simple idea, but one that has environmentalists hailing a success in efforts to save the endangered Mary River cod. For the first time, they propose built cod logs hollowed out from trees were used during the peak breeding season in Queensland's southeast.
In the upper reaches of southeast Queensland's Mary River catchment, finally there's some good news for the endangered Mary River cod. Researchers have discreetly filmed the fish making use of new purpose-built habitat. Logs for cods is a simple concept.
Any farmer has a chainsaw. We're a grassroots organisation and we want to develop systems that people can just go out and implement.
24 cod logs were carved out and wrestled into waterways in 6 tributaries of the Mary River catchment.
But for the whole year round, they're almost like a freshwater artificial reef.
Clearing, smothering silt from erosion and overfishing nearly wiped out the Mary River cod and its breeding habitat.
There's stories of massive cod in cod holes. Cod holes were popular fishing spots. Times even dynamited, apparently.
In recent years, successive floods have washed vital habitat logs away. The latest threat is an invasive, aggressive fish species called tilapia, which eats the Mary River cod's eggs and young.
They're cichlid, so they're quite aggressive.
From the 1st of August to the end of October, when they breed, all fishing is banned upstream of Gympie in the catchment.
So it's really important this time of year to just leave them be.
And in the first year of the project, the site that's given researchers the most hope for the future is this: an adult male Mary River cod guarding his mate's very large clutch of eggs in a cod log.
We're trying to restore habitat of an endangered species. We put a log into the river and we're seeing a success. It's spawning within that log. I think we need a little bit more of that nowadays.
Jennifer Nichols, ABC News.
Weather time now with Jacqui McLaren. And Jacqui, what an amazing sunset. It's beautiful.
I know, isn't it beautiful, Lexy? Madeline was treated to the golden glow in the scenic rim. Meanwhile, Jessica was lucky enough to capture the hues of pink and orange in Roma. Thanks everyone and good evening, Queensland. Well, we saw some storm activity bringing some gusty winds this afternoon, particularly for northwestern parts. Lake Julius, which is near Mount Isa, recording a wind gust of 108 kilometres per hour. Parts of the southeast saw some action too. As for temperatures, well, another warm one in the north. Camberwell out on top today at 41 degrees. Further south and Birdsville not far behind at 39. Meanwhile, Gladstone hit a top of 29 where Andrew was seeing double. And Halloween arrived a little bit early in Graceville, a little bit misty and spooky for John there today. But it was a sunny day to follow, the capital peaking at a top of 27. Onto the satellite and plenty of cloud building up around the tropics. And we do have a cold front moving through Tasmania where all that thick cloud is. So it is a chilly and wet 15 degrees for Hobart. Meanwhile, Broome heading for a warm 36 degrees. Onto the chart, and it is this high which is helping to keep things mostly settled for us, but that is about to change. The southern parts of this trough will deepen later in the week and move east. So tomorrow, most trick-or-treaters will dodge the showers and storms, with the activity kicking into gear late afternoon or evening, but we will see a risk of severe storm activity ramp back up on Friday. Well, let's take a look at our forecast now, and in the north, gusty and possibly severe storms continuing in the northwest, with heatwave conditions for parts of the peninsula. Central parts, and it's sunshine for you. It will be hot though, so do remain cautious as fire dangers are elevated and storms are possible. In the southeast, storms possible closer to the border and also further inland, and we do have a strong marine wind warning for you. 29 degrees for the Sunshine Coast. The capital heading for a top of 31. Storms are possible for you, Ipswich, and a top of 34. Gatton, you're heading for 34 as well. Surfers, the swell will drop off a little bit tomorrow with some clean waves in the morning. Perfect for the longboard. Boaties, winds reaching up to 25 knots. Seas about 1.5 metres. Sunrise will be at 4:57 and sunset will be at 6:06. And looking ahead, some unsettled weather on the way. Plenty of pockets of sunshine in the mix though. But Lexy, at least we won't see too many soggy lollies tomorrow for those trick-or-treaters.
Good news for the kids. Thanks so much, Jacqui. And that is News to the Moment. Thanks for your company. We'll keep you up to date on our website, but here is 7:30.